Look, if you are a first-year law student staring down the barrel of criminal law right now, you've definitely heard the horror stories about the Indeterminate Sentence Law, ISLAW. Yeah, it's that giant, terrifying math problem that keeps aspiring lawyers awake at night. But welcome to this explainer, because today we are bringing the energy and we're going to demystify this whole beast. We're breaking ISLAW down so clearly, step by step, that you are honestly going to feel like you have a cheat code for your exams. So grab your notes, take a deep breath, and let's conquer this together.
So start by asking yourself this: how do you calculate freedom? Because at the end of the day, calculating a criminal penalty under ISLAW isn't just about punching numbers into a formula or memorizing codes. It's about determining an actual human being's chance at redemption. It's balancing the strict scales of justice with the lived reality of a prison sentence.
Okay, to calm those pre-exam nerves, we are going to tackle this explainer exactly like levels in a video game. Level 1, the goal, parole and freedom. Level 2, cracking the formula. Level 3, adding circumstances to the mix. Level 4, the privileged mitigating exception. And finally, Level 5, the boss level, complex crimes.
All right, let's jump right in. Level 1, parole and freedom.
Before we even start crunching degrees and periods, we really need to understand why the Indeterminate Sentence Law even exists. The law specifies two things: a minimum and a maximum penalty. The maximum penalty is strictly necessary so the court can impose those extra accessory penalties. But the minimum penalty? That is the magic number. It's specifically designed to prevent the unnecessary deprivation of liberty and ultimately enhance a person's economic usefulness. That minimum penalty is the exact key that unlocks a prisoner's chance for parole. It gives them a tangible, real-world target to redeem themselves.
But winning that parole is really just the beginning. Once that minimum term is served, the prisoner becomes eligible for parole, which means they get to serve the remainder of their sentence out of jail. But they have to follow some seriously strict conditions. They have to get a legitimate job, prove they are a law-abiding citizen, keep a fixed residence, and constantly report to a parole officer. And if they violate any of these terms, boom, the board revokes their release, they are rearrested, and they go straight back to jail to serve the rest of their time behind bars.
Okay, moving on to Level 2, cracking the ISLAW formula.
These are the fundamental, basic moves you absolutely must memorize to survive your exams. It's an aggressively simple two-step formula. Step 1, find the maximum penalty. Step 2, go exactly 1 degree lower for the minimum penalty. And listen to me, you must follow this order. I'm warning you right now, if you mess up Step 1 and get your maximum penalty wrong, you will automatically fail Step 2. Your minimum penalty will be wrong by default. You absolutely have to nail the maximum first.
This really highlights the massive difference in how these two numbers are handled. The maximum penalty is rigid. It is locked into specific periods, minimum, medium, or maximum, pursuant to Article 64, depending entirely on the circumstances of the crime. But the minimum penalty, it is completely discretionary. The court can place it in any of its periods based on factors completely outside the strict mathematical formula. We're talking things like the offender's age, how they acted during the trial, or their mental and physical condition.
So, the single most crucial point to burn into your brain is this number: 1. When finding your minimum penalty, you simply get the penalty exactly 1 degree lower from the maximum penalty. And here's the secret trick: you do this without taking into account any of the regular mitigating or aggravating circumstances. Just drop 1 degree. Period.
Let's walk down this metaphorical ladder to see how it actually works. Let's use the crime of homicide as our example. Under the Revised Penal Code, the base penalty for homicide is reclusion temporal. So reclusion temporal is our maximum penalty. To find the minimum under ISLAW, we just step one single rung down the ladder. Dropping 1 degree from reclusion temporal lands you safely on prison major. So your minimum penalty is prison major in any of its periods. Pretty simple so far, right?
All right, time to level up. Level 3, adding circumstances to the mix.
This is where we introduce a little complexity. Think of these regular circumstances as power-ups or nerfs that push your penalty period up or down. Let's see how this builds our maximum penalty using Article 64. If you have 0 mitigating and 0 aggravating circumstances, the maximum penalty is placed in the medium period. 1 aggravating circumstance, it bumps up to the maximum period. 1 mitigating circumstance, it drops down to the minimum period. So back to our homicide example. If there's 1 aggravating circumstance, the maximum penalty is reclusion temporal in its maximum period. But what about the minimum penalty? It stays exactly the same. It is still 1 full degree lower, prison mayo in any period. Regular circumstances only shift the periods of the maximum penalty. They do not change the degree of the minimum penalty.
Getting trickier now. Level 4, the privileged mitigating exception.
This is the major rule breaker. It's the exact curveball that trips up so many freshmen on their midterms. So what is this exception? Well, when you have exactly 2 mitigating circumstances and absolutely 0 aggravating circumstances, it becomes a privileged mitigating circumstance. This means we break our standard 2-step rule. Instead of finding the maximum penalty in its normal degree, we actually drop down the ladder a full degree before we even calculate the maximum. For our homicide example, the maximum penalty drops from reclusion temporal down to prisión mayor in the medium period. Then, to find the minimum penalty, we drop another full degree down to prisión correccional.
But honestly, the law is incredibly strict about this privilege. It's almost funny how rigid this is. You could literally be an absolute saint with an absurd 8 mitigating circumstances, but if you have just one single aggravating circumstance, it ruins the privilege entirely. It will never ever become a privileged mitigating circumstance if even a single aggravating one is present.
Now, what if you start stacking multiple mitigating circumstances? Say you have 3 mitigating and 0 aggravating. The first 2 act as your privileged mitigating circumstance, dropping the penalty by 1 degree, and that third one pushes that new maximum penalty into the minimum period. But here is the absolute limit you need to know. The law only allows you to lower the penalty by a maximum of 2 degrees total. So whether you have 4 mitigating circumstances, 5, or even 6, the absolute lowest your maximum penalty can drop from reclusion temporal is 2 degrees down, landing on prisión correccional.
We made it. Level 5, boss level, complex crimes. All right, take a deep breath. This is the final and definitely the most challenging stage. If you master this, you are truly ready. Let's look at the core rule for complex crimes under Article 48. When someone commits a complex crime, the law doesn't just add the 2 penalties together. Nope. Instead, it severely punishes the act of combining offenses. You are punished by the most serious offense, and it shall be imposed in its absolute maximum period.
Let's use an example to see how this builds. Estafa through falsification of public documents. Falsification is punished by prisión mayor. Estafa is punished by prisión correccional. Now, falsification is obviously the more serious offense here. So, applying ISLAW in Article 48, your maximum penalty isn't just prisión mayor. It is prisión mayor locked firmly in its maximum period. And the minimum penalty? Just drop 1 degree like usual, down to prisión correccional in any period. But notice how absolutely ruthless Article 48 actually is. Suppose you have 1 regular mitigating circumstance proven in that complex crime. Normally, you'd think that drops you to a minimum period, right? Not here. Pursuant to Article 48, even with a regular mitigating circumstance present, the penalty must still be imposed at the maximum period. That regular mitigating circumstance does absolutely nothing to lower the maximum period in a complex crime.
Okay, but what if you have the ultimate power-up? What if you have 2 mitigating and 0 aggravating circumstances in a complex crime, a privileged mitigating circumstance? Well, the rule is you do get to lower the penalty by 1 full degree, but because it's a complex crime, you must still place it in the maximum period of that newly lowered degree. The complex crime rule acts as an absolute ceiling. It forces the period to the maximum no matter what. And just to make absolutely sure you have every single tool you need for your exams, here is a quick bonus rule. If a penalty comes as the result of a plea bargaining agreement, calculating the minimum penalty is super straightforward. It's simply 1 degree lower than the penalty of the downgraded offense. You literally just drop down the ladder once from whatever the newly agreed upon charges. Done.
Well, we've cracked the code. You know, the formula, the exceptions, and the brutal complex crime rules. But as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to step back from the math for a second and look at the big picture. We started by saying ISLAW is meant to prevent unnecessary deprivation of liberty, to give prisoners a real chance at parole and redemption. But after seeing how rigid, strict, and mathematically unforgiving these formulas can be, especially when we get into complex crimes, we really have to ask, do these strict formulas truly serve justice, or do they risk losing the human element entirely in a sea of numbers? Just a little something provocative to chew on before your next exam. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer, and keep studying hard.